The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents I'm Not Relevant. And neither are you. How you guys doing? I've been debating both in call-in shows in a more kind of casual, relaxed format and in public settings at universities and churches and conventions. A lot of different apologetics views and some non-religious views as well. I've been doing this for 20 years. I love it. And every debate that I participate in, I'm trying to teach and explain what I know and understand that's relevant to the topic and why. And I'm also hoping to learn something and hoping that my interlocutor feels the same way and has the same or similar goals. I'm hoping, generally speaking, to finally hear the valid and sound evidence-based case for their position, whatever it is. As I mentioned, debates have shifted and changed. The world has shifted and changed. There's a lot more sport and clickbait and frustration and getting so many people involved. And I'm not complaining because I'm still optimistic that I will find debate opponents, including some people that we don't particularly care that much for each other, but we at least respect that when it comes time to do the debate, no matter what our disagreements are, we are there for the same reason. We are there because we are convinced that we have good cases for our position and would like to kind of duel with those and expose. I'm not going to name anybody, but there are several, including someone who I thought was a friend and isn't a friend. Because you don't have to agree with me on everything to be friends. I have Christians who I love to interact with and debate with, and some Muslims and Hindus and others as well. But there's a trend that happens amongst these debate opponents. And at first I thought it was just kind of happening to me. You know, I've been doing these call-in shows for 20 years. I get referred to as, the OG or, what, it doesn't matter. I am not special or relevant. I've just done it. And I've developed over the years some non-minimal skill in explaining my thoughts in ways that are helpful to people. But lately, we've seen an increase in debate opponents and callers to the show who start with, yes, I'll present my case for God, but first, let me ask you, what sort of evidence would you accept? What do you think about this or that? Outside of questions like, would you accept a valid and sound argument? None of the questions they ask are relevant to this debate. If the questions are about how to determine if a particular premise is sound, or do I agree that it's sound, that's a discussion we can have afterwards. That's the whole purpose of the debate. You present your arguments, you present your evidence, you present your premises, and then we discuss whether or not we can or should accept those premises. If you're just trying to say, is it good enough if I say it's in my holy book? Then no, you're not actually presenting a case, you're just presenting the claim. If you have good reasons for something, you give those reasons. No case for any scientific position has ever started with, okay, I'm convinced that smoking increases the risk of lung cancer, but before I present my evidence and reasons, can I ask you if you would accept papers from this source? Are you familiar with so-and-so? Did you ever study carcinogenic biomass? Instead, you present the case and then you discuss it. That's the purpose of the debate. Here's my argument. Here's the support for it. Let's discuss it. What are your objections? What are your concerns? This is what a debate is. A debate is not, yes, I think Jesus is real. Yes, I think Jesus is God, and I will present my case for that right after I ask you. That's not how any of this works. And it's weird to watch this happen over and over again. For a while, because I do this for a living, because I'm out there prominently doing it both in paid public debates and in free live shows and everything else, multiple times a week, I used to probably do it more than anybody you could name, but now there are genuinely some incredibly gifted and busy atheist debaters who debate. Oh, it almost seems like some of them are on 24 hours a day. So I've been vastly eclipsed in probably the number of hours that some people have spent doing this. Though I'm not sure if I've been eclipsed in the number of hours that I've spent thinking about it and prepping for these things. But I thought it was an issue because debate opponents seem to keep showing up to debate me more than the subject. Oh, I'm going to debate Dillahunty. Rawr. And they show up with that mindset. I show up for the subject, so much so that on a number of occasions, I didn't know the name of my opponent and I didn't bother to look them up. Because I understand that who they are, what their history is, all of that is irrelevant to the subject. If I study and prepare for the subject we're going to debate, I should do fine. There's nothing about them that would change what my position is on the subject. As a matter of fact, I avoided it in part because there was a temptation to take the easy pitch shot or a cheap shot of, oh, I saw this video from them and they said and did this, which isn't relevant to the subject at hand, but might serve to disparage them or make them look foolish. I didn't want to be tempted by doing those things. Debate opponents, on the other hand, for me, would show up doing the opposite. And in part because they would want to debate you, more focused on debating you than they are on focused on debating the subject as well. Because that's how people tend to view debates, as if they're sport and you are the person I have to take down. No, you don't have to take me down. I'm irrelevant. You have to take down my argument. And you have to provide satisfactory responses to my attempted takedowns of your argument. And hopefully, on some occasions, we can maybe reach some sort of agreement. But religions are very personal. They get to the core of people's identities. They are not all about the feels, but they're a lot about the feels. And my opponents who get in this really focused mindset of it's time to take down Dillahunty, which is why there's reaction videos and videos up mocking me and stuff, because that earns them points with their friends. And because I've spent more than 20 years consistently, successfully teaching people how to reason better and how to spot the problems with theistic claims. My opponents, on some occasions, have flat out lied, either about me or about the arguments. They have lied about the evidence. They've lied about fallacies. They have changed the topic in question. They have attacked me personally, none of which is necessary if you have evidence for your position. It's genuinely just an admission that they don't, and they know they don't. They know they're on weaker footing. They know they're not able to present an evidence-based, valid and sound case for their God. But if they can make you look bad, if they can shut you up, if they can throw you a curve, lately there's a spate of philo debate bros. They're just running around calling into the show and rattling off a bunch of philosophy jargon, hoping that, ignoring anything you say that's correct or anything like that, and instead trying to be like, oh, which premise do you reject? Well, I'm sorry, but you've made a terrible mistake. It's not up to me to necessarily identify which premise I reject, because it might also be a structurally invalid argument. But even if I can point to a premise that I reject, when I do, I say, oh, I don't accept the first premise. And they're like, why not? I don't need to make a case for why I don't accept the first premise. You need to make the case for why we should all accept that first premise. This is an attempt on their part to shift the burden of proof. Instead of making the case for their premise, they just say, oh, you reject it, but you can't say how, ha, ha, ha. And then they'll go into things which aren't even true, like, oh, that's the fallacy. No, because I'm not saying your argument is false, and I'm not saying that because it's fallacious, it's false. I'm not even saying it's fallacious. I'm saying I don't accept the premise. But these are guys who are, and it's 99.9% guys. They're relying on ChatGPT and on some occasions, some friends. You can hear their friends sitting around typing and laughing and pulling up things, doing their little research so they can pull up something. Because if they catch you and they can show that you don't know what you're talking about, which is going to be the case for all of us on something many, many times. But then they want to pretend that you not knowing this particular argument, this particular jargon, this particular bit of philosophy, that demolishes anything and everything you've ever said, and then they win because their job isn't to demonstrate that Jesus Christ is Lord and King of Kings and lived and died and was resurrected. You know, if that's their case about Christianity, their goal is to show that the people who reject it are stupid, that they are terrible, that they are evil, that they are wrong about this, so they're probably wrong about the other things, because that's the way they live their life. They recognize that they can't make a reliable evidence-based argument for their beliefs, that the skeptics and secularists and even the members of other religions have consistently exposed the weakness and the inability, weakness of their arguments and their inability to structure one strongly. In fact, instead of defending a biblical worldview, one of my opponents was willing to concede it all if only I could tell him how a man might get pregnant. Quick side note, anyone with a functional womb can, in principle, get pregnant with no regard to their gender, their sexuality, their political preferences, their handedness, or my views on this. My views on all of that are completely irrelevant to whether or not they can get pregnant, and they're irrelevant to whether or not you can make your case for a biblical worldview or any other issue. My position on gender isn't even relevant to your position on gender. You're here to make a case for something. And if you would like to, hey, let's book a debate on gender and pregnancy and who can get, cool. I'm not necessarily the right person, depending on what the topic's going to be, but we can do that. But when you change the topic, misrepresent it, you're willing to concede, you're no longer debating the topic, you're coming after the person. This is always an attempt to fallaciously dismiss the opponent in order to dismiss their argument. It's an ad hominem, you could call it a straw man, any number of things. It is often veiled, though, because it's often presented as, hey, we're just discussing methods here. I just want to know that we're not wasting our time. That, well, maybe the fact that I've done this for ages is evidence that we're probably not wasting our time, or that I'm the one not wasting our time because I'm not going off on the irrelevant issues. But if they want to discuss methods, then that should, if that's the case, that should be what we're discussing. We should be discussing methodology and epistemology specifically, and not using that as a way of avoiding making our case for the issue at hand. A final caveat here, and that's to keep in mind, sometimes when apologists do this, it's because they know their reasons aren't good. They know that they are unable to make an evidence-based argument for something. But sometimes when they do this, it's because they genuinely don't understand logic or epistemology or how to argue. Sometimes it's done because they consciously or subconsciously are afraid that if they merely state something like, I believe the Bible, that they will appear ridiculous, unscholarly, gullible. And if they can knock you down a peg first, then at least we're all on ridiculous footing. This is where they get to the, well, you have faith too. Well, you believe things for bad reasons too. Well, you're religious too, in some regard. The tu quoque fallacy. So when it happens, whether you're in a big public formal debate, whether you're doing a call-in show, whether you're just engaging with family or friends, ask them why they are asking you questions about you. Remind them that you are irrelevant to what they believe and why they believe it. Your opinions on everything and everything about you are completely irrelevant to their case for God, unless they think you're God, in which case then you might become relevant. I hadn't really considered that. Maybe my opponents think that I'm God, and that's why they decided to make me relevant in these debates rather than presenting the God they believe in. Although, to be fair, if I were God, I would take the stand and demonstrate it. I wonder why their God doesn't do that. See you next time.